ultimately, I look at the vision of our company, and
Sure.
the vision of our company is to empower entrepreneurs to live a life of freedom. So your vision is your big, hairy, audacious goal, as the book Good to Great would say, right? That's your
Yeah.
BHAG that you'll probably never obtain. You're always pushing
Right.
towards. Is, hopefully by the end of Remindermead's life, on its tombstone, it says it helped move entrepreneurs more towards freedom in their business and in their life versus less. And how we do that every single day is your mission. That's when you do tactically. And our mission is to empower entrepreneurs to close more deals and retain more business. So tactically, every single day, we're helping entrepreneurs close deals, generate leads for their business. But the reason why I share the vision for my company, because it really stems from the vision of my life, which is I want to empower people to live a life of freedom. And I believe true freedom comes from knowing who you are and who your creator is.
What is up, friends? Rob here, and I'm back with a brand new Spitting Fire podcast for all of you today. And I'm with my man, Mr. Luke. Luke is going to spit some serious fire today. Luke, will you say what's up to everybody real quickly?
What's up, everybody? Thanks for having me, Rob. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. And listen, Luke is a coach. He's a speaker. He's a Jedi Knight marketer. He's a successful entrepreneur. I mean, fill in the blank. This guy has many talents. And listen, here's what I know is that he's going to impart something to you today that could change your life. And the reason I put could there is because you not only have to listen to it, but you got to take action on what is shared today. And that is why we do this Spitting Fire podcast, is we interview what I call kingdom entrepreneurs like Luke all across the country, have them share their story, have them just pour into all of you in hopes that you would bet on yourself, that you would chase what I call that God-sized dream in your heart, and that you would realize that there's more to life than just existing, that we want you to start living. So Luke, thank you so much for being on the podcast today. And it's Luke Acree, right? Did I say that correctly?
You did, man. You got it correct. Most people don't get it correct. So kudos
well,
to
my
you.
My last name is Sevilla, and I get saliva, Savalis, Seville, so I try to pronounce.
Is that why you called it Spitting Fire? Because you got saliva all growing up, so you called the podcast Spitting Fire?
Something like that. That's probably where it was birthed out of. But so I try to get people's last names right. But Luke, I just want to dive right into what in Mississippi we call the meat and taters. Okay, I just want to get right into it because I heard you at a mutual friends conference, Cody Askins 8% conference. Kaboom, by the way, Cody, for you as a kaboom for Cody. And I was really moved and just really impacted by your talk. Obviously, you were talking about marketing, but just right out of the gate, you were very passionate about talking about your faith. Real quickly, tell me how important that is to not only you as a person, but how you've interwoven that into your business as well. And then any little bio you want to share with us as well.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate being here. Thank you again. And obviously happy to share about my faith, because I ultimately, I look at the vision of our company, and the vision of our company is to empower entrepreneurs to live a life of freedom. So your vision is your big, hairy, audacious goal, as the book Good to Great would say, right? That's your BHAG that you'll probably never obtain. You're always pushing towards. Is, hopefully by the end of Remindermead's life, on its tombstone, it says it helped move entrepreneurs more towards freedom in their business and in their life versus less. And how we do that every single day is your mission. That's when you do tactically. And our mission is to empower entrepreneurs to close more deals and retain more business. So tactically, every single day, we're helping entrepreneurs close deals, generate leads for their business. But the reason why I share the vision for my company, because it really stems from the vision of my life, which is I want to empower people to live a life of freedom. And I believe true freedom comes from knowing who you are and who your creator is. And ultimately, that's the most important, is who did your creator create you to be? Who is that creator? I came to know Jesus at a young age. I grew up in a family of 8 kids. My dad's been a pastor for 36 years. But a classic, probably kid story growing up in church. By the time I hit 16, 17, had to go through the journey that all of us do, which is making your faith your own. So ended up leaving, the church and trying to look into, what I call our other religions, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, you name it. I was trying to look into it because I was struggling with some common struggles. Why does God allow evil? How can a good, loving God allow these things to exist? I grew up in the right after the Billy Graham era where it was very radicalized in sharing your faith. And I was in New York City. I remember this Central Park at 13 years old, going up to people with tracts. I didn't grow up in New York City. We were there on a mission trip, but going up and saying, "Hey, if you died today, do you know where you're going?" And I grew up in that culture of kind of that really radical sharing of your faith, which I think there's a lot of positives to it. But one of the negatives was it really caused me to question how radical you need to be about your faith. And it's like I got to a point, as crazy as it sounds, I couldn't even buy a Dr. Pepper because I was like, how can I spend $3 on this Dr. Pepper when there's kids who can't eat today? And it was just like, I couldn't even function because I couldn't determine how radical because I didn't understand grace and I didn't understand the gospel. And so in my journey of, looking into all the other religions, here's what I'll share, and I'll wrap up a long story with this, which is, Christianity is the only religion where it's not what you've done for God, it's what God's done for you.
Yeah.
Every other religion, it's call it legalism, call it the 7 steps to success, call it whatever you want to call it. Christianity is the only one where it's not what you've done, but it's what God has done for you. And because of what he's done for you, from that flows you wanting to do the life and walk in the design that God has created you to. So all that to say is that I'm passionate in my business, in my life, about bringing true freedom to people, which is getting them to experience the grace of knowing who Jesus is. And once you are secure in who you are, everything flows from that. And I can tell you stories, man, of what we've walked through at Reminder Media to tell you, man, it matters what your identity is, because from your identity flows everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And this identity drives behavior, right? Like, everything flows from that. And I totally agree. And isn't it interesting that we all battle insecurity to a certain degree, maybe some more than others, but I have found, and Luke, I'd love to hear your feedback on this. I call it getting in the secret place with God. That's my time in the morning, that I have found that when I'm consistently in that secret place, day after day, I get realigned with my Creator, right? And I'm reminded again of who I am and whose I am. Because there's tons of voices screaming at us every day. They're competing to drown out that voice of God in our lives. But every day when I'm in that secret place, I find that I'm less insecure. I find that I chase lesser things. I find that I don't do that, and that I find that I'm not comparing myself to others because I'm confident in what God has called me to be. Do you see that as well?
Oh man, it's so well said. You see that I always tell people, I shared this at the conference that you had referenced, is like, you are like the product of your environment. And like the environment you create is ultimately the things that you consume and who you hang around. So the podcast you listen to, like this, the TV shows you watch, you name it, right? The books you read, could go on and on. And the truth is what you deposit into your mind, you end up thinking about. What you think about, you tend to act upon. What you act upon becomes your habits. What your habits are become your character. Your character shapes who you are. And, that's why I think in the scriptures it talks about abide in me, right? It's like, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. What does that mean? It means like, hey man, if you want to be like Jesus, well, how do you spend time with Jesus? Spend time in his Word, because the Word is Jesus, basically.
Yeah.
It's your ability to interact and learn who he was. And so I just encourage people all day long is that if you're off in your life, you're a body, mind, and spirit. Some describe it body, mind, and spirit, soul, but you're a body, mind, and spirit. I would challenge you, both in the physical and in the spiritual, if you feel down and depressed right now, because I have often felt that in my journey in business, is I look to, well, how am I feeding my body, mind, and spirit? Am I eating healthy? Am I getting sleep? Am I working out? If I'm not doing that, well, there's a chance maybe I'm experiencing the product of that. What about my mind? What am I feeding my mind? What am I reading? What am I listening to? Who am I hanging around? People often tell you you're the sum of the 6 people that you hang around with, but they don't tell you that oftentimes you also got to cut people out of your life. One of my the scriptures I think about often was Joseph in the Bible, how he ran when Potiphar's wife came at him. He ran. Sometimes you got to run away from people in your life, and they don't tell you that. They just tell you be friends with people. They don't tell you to cut some people out, and you really do have to cut some people out. But then, you also take the spiritual side, which is what you're saying, that secret place in the morning, where are you going in the morning to
Yeah.
feed your soul, to feed your spirit, to
Yeah.
reflect. So much, I don't know because I'm not a scientist or biologist or anything like that, but you often hear these neuro,
Sure.
scientists and stuff talk about how your brain is getting 100,000 plus thoughts a day.
Yeah.
And if you look at what you do every single day, most of it is the subconscious mind.
Yep.
Like how you got out of bed this morning, what you went and made your coffee, how you drove to work. It's why you experience the phenomenon of you got to work and you don't remember driving there.
Yep.
Because it's the subconscious mind that's doing it. It's your habit that's been done over and over again. Well, one of the only ways to break into the subconscious mind and change what your routine is, 98% of what you're doing is routine, is you got to sit and meditate and reflect. And you think about when you're getting, when you're sitting down, you're reading the scriptures and you're in prayer and you're trying to be still and hear from the Lord. What are you doing? You're literally meditating, reflecting. You're trying to get down deep and almost to the subconscious mind.
Sure.
To take off the old self, put on the new. But anyways.
No, I definitely love that. And listen, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening to this on one of the platforms, don't miss there was two big nuggets there. Luke, you're already spitting fire right out of the gate. Number one is, I like to say it this way, the content that you consume the most is what you become the most like, right? And if you want to change your life today, change the content that you're consuming, right? That you're putting in your mind, you're putting in your spirit. Take an audit. Right? This is part of that reflection that Luke is talking about. Take an audit of the podcast you're listening to. Are you watching more reality drama TV than you are getting information that's moving the needle towards your God-given purpose? Right? And the other thing that I liked, which you really talked about too, Luke, is in regards to, getting, once again, returning to that secret place, once again, getting realigned, once again, meditating and getting in alignment with your Creator, because I believe alignment with your Creator drives everything, right? Because it's easy to get out of alignment with God. Let me ask you this too, because you touched on it real quickly about the tracks, the good old days, and all of that. And of course, street witnessing is what we called it when I was a kid. And I'm all for that, and there's sincere people that do that. But what I have found is that a lot of times what I found in some of this radical stuff was that it was more transactional that was relational. And when I look at Jesus in the Bible, I go, Jesus was very relational, right? Even our whole Christianity is founded on relationship versus just this man-made religious thing, right? Religion is performing for God, right? Where I'm working for my faith, where relationship is working from my faith. There's a big difference. Can you talk about the relational aspect of finding what I call true Christianity and how it just permeates every part of our lives, even our business?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's well said. I love how you framed that up there. Yeah, I would agree. I think, the sharing and evangelizing in the park, though I think can be used and is good, I don't think it ultimately brings people well, I shouldn't say that. I believe that you bring people more to Christ by showcasing Christ in your life. It's like, I forget the scripture, but it says, let your good works, basically do your good works for men, that it points to your Father in heaven.
Yeah,
in essence, meaning, as you live your life, you are showcasing to people more Christianity than you preaching to them. I think we get too preachy, which can lead to a false religion, call it legalism, call it works-based religion, because it becomes performance-based in the way you're even sharing it versus just loving on people. And you look, Jesus definitely preached, he definitely evangelized, but he walked with the sinners. Like he lived a life amongst the sheep, as they say. And so I've just found in my life, I used to be one that would debate all the time, and I don't know if I really brought anybody to knowing Christ through debate versus actually just living life with them and loving them. And I find that reaches more people than debate. Now, I want to be cautious here because on a podcast or on a stage, it seems like you're speaking in absolutes where everything is nuanced. It's more nuanced than that. Because I think there's a time to speak the truth and a time to be just hardcore and like, this is the truth and I'm not going to back down from it. And a lot of times the time to do that is on interviews, right? But I think if we really challenged ourselves as believers, what's the best way to reach people? It's through the way you live your life. It's how you live. And Gandhi said this, and sorry to cut you off there, but Gandhi said, I love your Jesus, I just don't like your Christians, because your Christians are so unlike your Jesus. And it's like, I often think about that as going, man, when people see me, who was it? I don't know who said this, but somebody said, if you were put on trial today for being a Christian, would there be enough evidence to convict you? And I think about that often. It's like, is there enough evidence of how I've lived even this morning, all the way, it's at 5 o'clock now my time? Is there enough evidence this morning of how I treated my coworkers, how I've treated the prospects that I've talked to, what I've said in these interviews, that people will go, that person's a follower of Christ? And would there be enough evidence there?
Yeah, and I love that. And going back to the relational versus the transactional, that's just the way that I view it, is if it's transactional, your faith, you really treat people as projects, right? A project that I can clean up and help get their act together. But when you look at it through a relational lens, you see them made in the image of this divine creator, that they have worth, that they have value. When it's transactional, you know this, being around the block a few times in the Christian circles, what happens is you begin to develop your own version of the 10 Commandments that highlights your righteousness and everyone else's depravity. Right?
That's so
and when you're in relationship, you recognize your brokenness and your weakness. And it goes back to one of my favorite scriptures, Romans 5:8. And I'm paraphrasing, but God demonstrates his love for us, that while we were yet sinners, and I add a little bit to that, not in a bad way, but while we were yet sinners and enjoying it, he sent Christ to die for us. And so I look at that and go, man, this infinitely righteous, holy, this sovereign King of Kings, this Lord of the cosmos who needed no one or nothing, chooses to lean into our yuckiness, into our griminess, into our messiness. And I don't know about you, Luke, but my response can only be, here's my life. Right? As you said earlier, Christianity is the only religion where we're not trying to get to the supreme being or the creator, but the creator came and leaned into our story, even when it was yucky. And listen, he's not intimidated by our mess. And that is the good news. Would you agree?
100%. I often tell people, it's kind of like, it's so hard to comprehend. Like, okay, well, why not just go on sinning, right? And Paul talks about, why would I go on sinning, right? That grace would abound. And the point being is, like, I think of the analogy of my wife and my love for my wife, Megan. So I'm married, have 2 kids, and, there's no amount that I can do to prove my love for Megan, meaning I don't have to buy flowers once a month. I don't have to take her on X amount of date nights a year. It's not a regulatory type. If I do X amount of things, I've proven my love for Megan. But because I love Megan, from that flows what? I want to buy her flowers. I want to go on date nights. I want to spend time with her. So the relationship with God and Jesus is very similar. It's like there's no amount of times you go to church, times you pray that earn your love and showcase your love for Christ. But because you love Christ, you want to do those things. It flows from you because you understand the relationship that you have. And that was transformational for me in understanding there's nothing I can do. There's no amount of works. The thief on the cross didn't do anything. I guess he said, Lord, remember me, but he didn't do anything. And he was with Jesus in paradise. And the point being there is that once you understand that, oh my gosh, it frees you. And it applies to so much. Everything that we've talked about so far applies so much to business. Business is about relationships, right? It's not about the transaction. Not only that, you can't make it through adversity in business without knowing your identity and why you exist in your business. Like so many of the principles, the biblical principles, if you apply them to how you run your business, you will run your business better. You got to be careful, or at least believers need to be careful of the health, wealth, and prosperity gospel. But your business runs better, your relationships run better when you apply these principles in your business.
Yeah, and I like to say it this way, that adversity is included in everyone's assignment. It's guaranteed. No one's immune to it. If you're going to live on assignment, right, you better be guaranteed that adversity is right around the corner. And I love that. You're exactly right. When we bring and we lead with impact over income, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, because I have seen this in my own business, that when I lead with impact, when I lead with mission, when I lead with purpose, right, over income and profits and money, the byproduct of that is all of that, right? That's one of the byproducts. When you're truly building relationships with people and you're impacting lives, I have seen the income on the other side of that, but I'm not chasing that, right? I have nothing wrong with that, because I want people to be successful, because I truly believe, hey, God, if you bless me, I want to be a bigger blessing to more people, right? That's to me is the heart of a kingdom entrepreneur. But talk about that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on the adversity side, because I run into so many people in different entrepreneur industries that really just crumble when anything bad happens, right? And you know this, even in the Christian faith, a lot of times people think God is doing something to them, right? When it's just life.
It's like Jonah, throw me overboard, throw me. No.
Right. But then I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. But then also, on the other as well.
Yeah, so I'll tackle the impact one first, at least from a business perspective, right? It's like study human psychology is people want to do business with people they know, like, and trust.
Sure.
And like a lot of times people see through the first lens, which is, I like you, Rob, you're a good personality, you're fun to be around, we connect, this is great. But it's not just like in that way. It's people want to do business with people they know, like, and trust, but it's not just like, it's that they are like. That they are like, meaning commonality. And the commonality is things like, I'm a father, you might be a father, we connect. You have pets, I have pets, we connect. Yeah. You have, you're a believer, I'm a believer, we connect on common things. It gets deeper though, it's values based. When you have similar values like somebody, you naturally are bonded and connect to them more and want to do more business with them or want to be around them. So translate this to business and marketing, study the Fortune 500 companies. They all have a charity they support. Why do they do that? These are beholden to the stockholders, right? The CEOs have to drive the share prices up. That's what they need to do. So why are they spending hard-earned marketing dollars and money on supporting a charity? They're doing that because they're not dumb. They know consumers want to do business with people of purpose, not just people of profit. So yes, they do probably truly care about that charity they support, but they know psychologically consumers are value driven. They want to support brands and do business with people that have common values. And so when you think about impact, think about like, wow, challenge yourself. If you're an insurance agent right now, if you're a small business or even a big business, it's like, how are you giving back? And how are you showcasing that giving back to your constituents, your client base, so people can see what you are involved in, because it's going to make them know, like, and trust you more, which will make them buy from you more, which will make them prefer you out more. So it is a principle that does something good. And then there's this effect in psychology called the halo effect, which basically says if I see Rob doing something good, I associate that good with everything else he does. So if you see me, like Reminder Media, we have a charity issue we do every year of our magazine. If you see us, doing Feeding America or partnering with CHOP and, the Children's Hospital Network and all that stuff, you naturally associate that with how we treat our clients, how we treat our prospects. Like, it's just that association gets applied. Now, I always am careful when I talk about this stuff, because I make the caveat, don't just be a manipulator doing charity for the gain, but there are some great benefits like that happens in marketing when you focus on making your business about purpose versus profit. Number 2 selling book of all time, at least in Christian circles, is The Purpose-Driven Life. There's a reason for that. People want purpose in their life. When I look at adversity, I'll share a quick story with you. The reason why I think you have to know your identity so much is because, you read these books like Start with the Why, or you watch Simon Sinek's famous TED Talk, Start with the Why. The greatest companies, it's not what they do, it's why they do it.
Sure.
Right? So if you don't know your identity, the problem you have is that you're like a leaf in the wind. You're not intentional. You're driven by the wind and you're bouncing back and forth. And because you're not intentional, you lose focus. And where your focus goes, your energy flows. And imagine having 4 focuses and 100% effort. You're moving the ball 25% down the field. You never score a touchdown, but you're working your butt off and you never accomplish anything. So it's like you have to know who you are. But that applies to adversity. So about, 7 years ago now, something like that, we got punched in the face, which happens a lot. I had hired a VP of finance. It was the first time I'd ever hired a VP of finance. I'd always had like an accountant, a controller, never gotten up to VP of finance. And the VP of finance comes to me after a month or so of being there and goes, "Hey, Luke, where's your sales tax? Like, where do you file your sales tax?" And I'm like, "Oh, what do you mean? We do our federal taxes, everything like that, but magazines, they're not taxed, right? They're not sales tax," which is true in some states, but we had gotten that advice, I guess, early on and just had never looked into it year after year. So side note to everybody listening, get a good accountant and a good lawyer and check it every single year because laws change. And so we're focused on growing the business. We're not focused on the regulation side or compliance side like we should have been. What comes out, long story short, we owe millions in back sales taxes, millions. It was pretty discouraging, pretty depressing. So much so that it's like, oh man, if the government finds us before we voluntarily disclose to the government, it could sink our business, everything we've built. And that's a punch in the face, man. That's like a moment in time. You're like, I can't believe this. Like, I've worked hard, and I remember, I won't use his name, but I remember telling my VP of finance, "Hey man, we can get through this. Don't worry. We'll do the VDA program, which is you voluntarily disclose, and they give you a break on some penalties. You still have to pay a bunch of stuff, all that stuff." And that was 3-4 years taking care of all that. But we're through it. God's blessed us. It's been amazing. We've gotten through it. We've done everything we need to do, which is awesome. So the story ends well. But I tell my VP of finance, I say, "Hey man, just don't quit on me." And what do you think he does? Like a couple weeks later, he quits.
Yeah.
He quits. And I'm sitting there. I went to community college for 2 years, and I went to 4-year university. I've never taken an accounting class. I'm staying up here till 2 a.m. every night, basically trying to figure out, okay, how do we pay these taxes in the township of North Carolina and this, all this, trying to figure this crap out. And the reason why I share this story is if you don't know why you're doing what you're doing in that moment, I hate to break it to you, you're probably going to give in and quit.
Sure.
You're going to. I know people who can't even make their cold calls every day to their leads because they don't have a big enough purpose and identity. It's like you have to know why you're doing what you're doing.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be altruistic and massive, philosophical. That's a great thing that grounds you as a human being. I know where my true value comes from. It can be simple, like I'm trying to provide for my family a good income and I'm going to make this work for the time being. But you have to hone in on who am I? Where's my self-worth come from? And then what is my purpose with this company? Like, what am I trying to do here with this organization? Because that has to be big enough for you to overcome that adversity of those punches in the face. I could tell you many stories of, that's millions back. I have one where 17 people quit on me in 2 weeks. There's just been things along the road where you go, oh yeah, if you don't have this wherewithal within you to be locked on your vision, you'll quit. And that's why the greatest entrepreneurs, they have the Cortez mentality people talk about, which is burn the ships. Yeah. Right? You got to burn the ships and be all in. So.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point. And I think also, if I could add to that, and I'd love to hear your feedback on this as well, is because we've had those moments. 3 years ago, we had to reset. Unfortunately, had a nasty divorce from our former upline, and that's not to throw shade at them. We want them to be blessed as well. But it just didn't go well. But things just happen in life, and we were left 10 days before Christmas with nothing. And we had to push the reset button, and therefore Agape was born. Right, our insurance agency. And so, but listen, I had learned how to do business credit. I started taking out business credit cards. And listen, I'm pretty radical. I know some people go, I would never do that. But I knew my purpose. I knew what God had called me to do. And I knew that if I just bet on myself, but more importantly, bet on the God of the universe who says he would supply everything I need, because that's the beautiful part about it. Even though he allows us to go through adversity, what I have found in my own life is that he supplies everything I need to get through the adversity.
I love that.
Right? And so that's what I love about what you're saying. But here's the second part. I also had people in my circle. You talked about that earlier. See, listen, I want to pause for a minute. If you're watching this today or listening to this, some of you have people in the VIP section that need to be in the nosebleeds. Let that sink in for a minute, okay? You got them in the VIP section and they need to be in the nosebleeds. It doesn't make them less than. It doesn't mean you hate them. It just means for this season, they don't need to be in the VIP section of your circle. And so, Luke, if I wouldn't have had people within my community that, some of them more on the spiritual side prayed for me and encouraged me, but also those that were on the business side just to mentor me, coach me through it. I feel like I still would have made it, but it just really helped to have people to lock arms with during that time. Have you seen that in your own life as well?
Oh, yeah, man. Oh, yeah. It's amazing. What is it? Your burden becomes your blessing, as they say, right? The saying. For sure. Blessed is a person who has, wise counsel.
Sure.
And it's like you need to have a couple people in your life that you will lower your guard around and you will trust. You can't trust everybody. I'm just warning you, that's a big mistake you can make in business, is being too trusting. But you've got to choose some wise counsel. I don't know if that's a proverb or not. I should probably know my scripture better than I do. But you need to have a couple wise counsel that you let in. And then what is it? It's like a cord that has two or more strands is not easily broken, right? And that can apply to a bunch of different things. But I have seen that in my own life. You have to have people in your corner that are pointing you and reminding you of who you are. But a lot of times it's not who you think it's going to be. Sometimes the people that are closest to you, they want the best for you, but they're not giving you the best advice because they live in a fearful mindset, not a mindset of abundance. One of the things I loved about what you just said was, oftentimes God puts you through adversity, I think, to remind you of your dependence on him.
Yeah,
and it's a place for you to step out in faith. If you think of Abraham, he left not knowing where he was going. Right? He stepped out. Can you imagine going somewhere not knowing where you're going, but you're having to trust in God? And it doesn't mean you shouldn't use wisdom. God's giving you a brain. He's giving you wisdom. He's giving you things like that. But he wants you to lean on him in all your ways. Acknowledge him in all your ways, and he'll direct your path. And so I loved what you said of just you weren't sure, but you knew God knew. And you were going to do what? You were going to be a good steward of what he's given you. And that right then, at that time, you didn't have much, but you had the work ethic. And so you were a good steward of not being lazy, of putting in the work, of building something back up, of stewarding your relationships. I'm sure that you were given or whatever. I don't know your whole story, but that's really what I look at and I go, because you trusted in him to fulfill his promise and you stewarded it well, the gifts he had given you, here you are today.
Yeah, and I don't have it twisted, man. We are here today. Yes, we collaborated with God. We put the work ethic in, right? We did what we had to do. But I tell people, when you stay in alignment with him, right? You just said it. You put in the work ethic. You put in the hard work, the hustle, the grind, whatever terminology you want to use there. But he exponentially grows it when you invite his super into your natural. Right? That's where prayer comes in. That's where that quiet time, that alignment time comes in. I don't have it twisted. We are here today because he has exponentially done more than we could ever imagine. Right? It shouldn't blow our minds because it's God and we read about it in the scriptures, but it blows our minds. But here's the other thing, and I know some people have differing views on this, and I'd just love to hear your feedback on this. And got a couple more questions, and then we'll close shop today, Luke. But I also believe it's because we gave to God first, right? We told God from the very beginning that this is your business and we're giving to you first. Now, I get it. Some people don't believe in tithing. Some people believe in percentage giving, whatever the case may be. I don't want to get lost in all of that. But what I'm saying is we gave back to God first, right? We gave him first because we wanted to show him, yes, our dependence is on you. And you can do way more. In our case, we do believe in tithing and we do give God the first tithe, right? And we believe that God can do more than we could ever do with the 90%, right? Than we could ever do with 100%. Right. So can you talk about that, like just giving back to God first? Because Deuteronomy talks about that, right? He gave us the power to create wealth, but here's where the warning was coming from. He was warning his people to not forget him. And a lot of times when riches and fame and affluence and everything come, it's easy to forget who gave you the skill set to create the wealth.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of my fears. It's like the Bible talks about money almost the most, right, of anything. And it's, it's harder for a rich man to enter into heaven than to pass through, a camel to pass through the eye of a needle or whatever. And so I look at it and I go, God judges the heart, right? It's not about necessarily the amount you give or the technicality of how you give. I think that's human. That's our brain trying to religiously figure out what are the steps, because that's what we do. God's judging the heart of the person, and he gives you structures like give of your first fruits, because when you have to give of your first fruits, it's showcasing that of utmost importance, my heart is committed to you, God. So as long as you are looking at it through that lens, I think God is going to judge the heart of the person. And that's why you see in the widow in the Bible who gives the mite gave more than the people who gave a lot more riches. And so I always challenge my heart where's my heart? Is my treasure stored up here on earth, or are they stored up in heaven? Because I can have a storehouse here on earth that's full, but my heart can't be tied to that. My heart needs to be tied to my treasure stored up in heaven, which is really knowing who my Savior is. So it's like, that's so grounding for me and freeing for me, because if I don't do well on the 8% conference stage, that's okay. If I don't do well in business this year, that's okay. I don't want to, dude. I want to do well. I want to get the storehouses here on earth, because it makes life fun and better and all this stuff in certain regards. But my identity, again, is not in that. And my identity is in trying at least to live for Christ, because I find true joy, if you think of the fruits of the Spirit, here's how I think about it. It's like, think about it. Love, joy, peace, right? Long-suffering, patience, all these things. It's like, talk to rich people, and you get in a room with people with 20 million plus in net worth, 50 million plus in net worth, and ask them about what's their favorite thing to do. And if they have families, if they have kids, most of them are like, spending time with my kids, spending time with my family. That's something you can do without money, right? So you get, like, if you are like, get around people who have wealth. Like, wealth doesn't bring happiness. It doesn't bring joy and peace and love and pain. God brings that joy, that peace that passes understanding. He fills your life up with that fruit. And here's the thing that has been really impactful for me lately. It's like, I think D.L. Moody said this. I'll hold up this coffee cup that's on my desk. If you wanted to get the air out of this coffee cup, how would you do it? How would you get the air out? And the air is the world. If the air is all the trappings of the world and the sin and everything like that, how do you get it out? Well, the only way to get it out is to pour water into it. And as the water enters into the cup, all the air gets pushed out. And if you think about that from an example standpoint, if you want to rid yourself of the world, you can't. It's impossible. You know how you do it, though? You fill yourself up with Christ. You fill yourself up with the Spirit. And as the Spirit fills you up, then the world gets pushed out of you. And it gets back to what we talked about in the beginning. It's like, abide in me. I don't have to do anything. I just have to attach myself to the vine, which is Jesus. And then the true vine, as you're attached, it flows through you. It flows the nutrients through you. You're not doing it. It's Christ doing it in you. And that's been a thing that I've never quite understood, because I've always been so works-based. And it's like, oh, no, I just need to surrender and abide in Christ. And as I abide in him, his supernatural power will transform me and sanctify me. And I have to continually submit to him as my Lord. And that's been something that I've been, wrestling with, and also trying to live out in my life.
And it's a daily struggle, right? I tell people I have a daily struggle. Do I build the kingdom of Rob, or do I advance the kingdom of God? Right? There's this struggle every day. Do I build the kingdom of me, myself, and I, or do I advance the kingdom of God? And so I definitely love it. It's a struggle for all of us. One thing I wanted to ask you is on the 8% stage, you talked about being homeschooled, if I remember correctly,
Yeah.
right? And you have this successful company, Reminder Media, right? Very successful company. Let me ask you something. Going back to your homeschool days, if we could flash back, right? You may not want to, but we'll go back there just for a second. What was a trait, a principle, a value, whatever terminology you want to use there, that you learned while being homeschooled that contributed to part of your success with Reminder Media today?
Great question. I think probably I look back, one of the greatest gifts of being homeschooled is that you're not put into the structures of like schooling. Like my wife was a teacher before she stayed at home mom, so I don't want to beat up schooling too much, but one of the issues I see with school is you sit in a classroom for hours, you memorize to take a test, you're not really learning. Where homeschooling gives you the ability, because it's not as structured, at least ours wasn't, and I love my mom, but it wasn't as structured. It was really about like learning, like we were learning, and I didn't think, oh, there's a proper way I have to do this. I have to answer the multiple choice questions, or I have to. So I constantly find myself thinking about just solving the problem, not like what's the manual to do it. Where I find a lot of people I interact with, I don't know if it's just who I've come in contact with, it's not a blanket statement across everybody, but they kind of are looking for like the manual, there's a right way to do it, so we got to, do it X, Y, Z, where I'm just kind of like, well, if we're moving these cinder blocks over here, well, I'm just going to do this. And it's like, for some reason, people are like, well, that's different. And it's like, well, I'm just thinking about the result, that I want less the rules of how to get there and do it properly, which has hurt me sometimes too. No, so it's not all good, but I like thinking outside the box. There's not a right way. There's not a one way to do things. There's many ways to do things. If you focus on the result you're going for and the value, and not what's the rules or what's the right way to do it, then you'll win way more. That's
so good, because I'm right there with you. I'm just not afraid to color outside the lines, man. And like you said, now there's a big cost to it sometimes. My wife is in the other room, and she would say, hey, you colored outside the lines too much in this season. So I think there is some wisdom you got to use there. But I agree with you.
What you see a lot of entrepreneurs are dropouts in college. Not all of them, right? These are such blanket statements, so I think you mean either way. But that's why you see a lot of that, is because they weren't good at, necessarily doing the exact coloring in the lines and stuff like that.
Well, and I love what you're saying too, because I tell people, it's so easy to be offended in this culture about everything. But here's the thing: when you live in a spirit of offense, you close so many opportunities that God has for you. Right? I'm going to rewind that again and say it. Like, when you live from a spirit of offense, you close so many opportunities that God has for you, because offended people, they don't attract opportunities, right? They attract other offended people.
True,
and so,
man.
and I'm not saying there isn't some validation to being offended. That's not what I'm saying, right? Let me put a disclaimer there. But what I'm saying is that when you say statements and you say things, so many times people are quick to rush and judge. So I love that, coloring outside the lines. Last question: if there was one word that you could use to describe yourself, if there's one word that came to your brain, what would that word be? That's part A to the question. Part B is, how has that contributed to the massive success you've had with Reminder Media?
I would say the first word that popped into my mind is influence. So I'm a high I, I'm a high D too. In the disc, I is influence, D is like almost domination, or like how you kind of dictate. But influence, John Maxwell says it best: leadership is influence.
That's right.
And so I have found that what has helped me in Reminder Media a ton is influencing people to see their potential and opportunity, and inspiring them every single day to go chase that. And that's really been my MO. Is I get around people, and I've just been told over and over again, I don't mean it arrogantly, but but people get around me and they feel joy and they feel an influence, they feel a happiness, like I can go run through that wall, I can do that.
Yeah.
And that I've tried to take with me everywhere I go, that if you're going to come in contact with me, I hope at the end of my life people will say I reached a little bit more freedom in my life, spiritually, physically, emotionally, work-wise, because I interacted with Luke Acree. That would be what I hope they say about me. First and foremost, that I was a follower of Christ, because I think that's where ultimate freedom comes from.
Sure.
But I'm hoping to influence people in their life in that way, and that's what fuels me and motivates me. So I think it's who God made me to be.
Well, I'll just encourage you, my man, like at 8%, you know how it is at some of these conferences, it's like a rapid fire speakers. So you definitely had passion, you caught my attention, but I think the thing that really resonated with me was really just the genuineness and authenticity.
Thank you.
Right. And it wasn't just the cookie cutter statements of just regurgitating everything else. So I want to encourage you to keep doing that, because I know you've spit some fire here today. I know you've provided some value. The people that watch this podcast are aspiring entrepreneurs. Maybe they're still in the W-2 and they're just scared to bet on themselves and take that plunge, or maybe they're going through a hard season right now. Right? And they don't realize that the hard seasons are not meant to destroy them, but to develop them. What you said today, I believe, is going to help them get through those hard seasons. So I just want to say thank you for taking a few minutes with us today and pouring into my audience. Any last words before we close shop today?
Man, I appreciate you, Rob. I appreciate the impact you're making. I love meeting other Kingdom entrepreneurs. I think that is awesome. I have always closed every one of my podcasts, and when I talk with people, I always tell them, look, the difference between top producers and mediocre producers is top producers take action. So, the Bible would say it, don't just be a hearer of the word, be a doer.
That's right. That's good.
And so you have to take action. It's not the smartest who win, it's the ones who act. And my secret in business has been act, track, so you can know where you're going, right, and how good you're doing, and then pivot. If you just go, I'm acting, I'm tracking, and I'm pivoting, because life is a constant pivot, and you're iterating and you're developing, you will win. But most people never start with the act. They never act. And it's just like, just take the leap, take action, track your results, and pivot based upon what you learned. And if you do that over and over again, you're going to win.
Man, that's so good, man. Way to close out the podcast. Where can people find you? If they say, man, I really like this Luke guy, how can I connect with him? Where's the best place to find you?
Yeah, best place is on Instagram, at Luke Acree, or you can find me on Facebook or LinkedIn, same thing, at Luke Acree. I would love to connect with you there. Let's connect. If I can help you in any way in your business, let me know. Would love to talk to you and love to encourage it.
Absolutely. We'll put those links in the video description when this episode drops. Listen, I don't think there's anything else we can say except God has a purpose for you. Isn't it about time that you start living on purpose and living out that purpose? God bless you guys. Take a moment to like, comment, subscribe. Give us some feedback below. I'd love to hear your comments on this particular podcast, and we'll see you on the next Spitting Fire episode.